Welcome to the Symphony of the Potomac's 2012-2013 season at the Cultural Arts Center. This is the orchestra's 5th season, and if I recall correctly, including its illustrious history as the Jewish Center's resident orchestra, it's my 25th year with the orchestra. We have a very interesting assortment of repertoire this year, works familiar and unfamiliar, works which the orchestra has played before, works which the orchestra hasn't played. Most years we have a mixture of soloists, string, pianists, sometimes singers. This year we've got 3 pianists. Alan Goldstein, who has often appeared with us, a much-loved colleague, Rachel Franklin, who opens the season, and Sayaka Jordan in April. And they are playing very, very different works. Alan plays the remarkable Defaya Nights in the Gardens of Spain. Rachel plays the familiar and deeply passionate Rachmaninoff Second Piano Concerto. Sayaka plays the Beethoven Emperor on an all-Beethoven program. The first concert of the year we've titled Romantic Favorites. What's interesting, of course, is that actually all 3 works on the program were written within an incredibly short length of time. The Dvořák New World Symphony from 1893, Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto, 1902, the Sibelius Karelia music, somewhere in between. And yet they are very different works in the grand romantic tradition. This reflects not only the personality of the 3 composers in question and their national backgrounds, but also the fact that they each are from a slightly different vintage. Dvořák, the oldest of the 3, and Rachmaninoff, the youngest. We begin our program with Sibelius' Karelia Suite. Sibelius orchestral music basically can be divided into 3 categories: symphonies, symphonic poems, most of which treat subjects from the Finnish national epic, the Kalevala, and suites arranged from incidental music to plays. Sibelius wrote a lot of incidental music to plays, both plays by major playwrights such as Shakespeare and plays by minor Scandinavian poets, and dramatic pageants illustrating aspects of Finnish history, which were terribly important during the Finnish struggle for national identity and eventually liberation from the Tsarist Empire of Russia. Karelia Suite is a compilation of movements taken from music for a patriotic pageant about the Karelia region, which is of very great importance in the evolution and history of Finland. And these accompanied tableaux vivants on the stage. They're highly atmospheric pieces. The first of them has this wonderful misty opening out of which distant horn calls emerge and draw closer and closer, and then the procession vanishes into the distance. The second movement is lyrical, chorale-like even. The finale has one of these tunes which, once heard, will stay in your mind for weeks afterward, a jaunty march, which brings the suite to a rousing conclusion. Devastated by the critical and popular failure of his first symphony, which received an excruciatingly bad performance at the hands of Alexander Glazunov, the wonderful composer and teacher, who was unfortunately an alcoholic and was apparently quite plastered at the time he conducted its premiere, Rachmaninoff was in a state of terrible depression and gloom when he came to write his Second Piano Concerto a few years later. He suffered from a major block, writer's block, and went to a psychiatrist who offered him a kind of hypnotherapy, which consisted of suggestions that you will write easily, the work will be of wonderful quality, and remarkably, it broke through this dreadful impasse for him. The concerto is, I would think these days, about as popular as any piano concerto in the world is. It has glorious melodies, opulent orchestration, and a spectacular piano part. Rachmaninoff was, of course, one of the greatest pianists of all time. He died as recently as 1943. There are still people alive who heard him play in the early 40s, and there are, fortunately, recordings of him playing most of his own major works, made in the late 30s and early 40s, which are awfully frightening. They at once tell you a great deal and tell you nothing which you can possibly learn from, except to be a great pianist. I had the pleasure of hearing Rachel Franklin play this piece with the Piedmont Orchestra a few years ago. I'd known her beforehand, and hearing her play it convinced me that we had to do this. Curiously, although we've played the third concerto, the first concerto, and the Paganini Rhapsody, the latter as recently as last season, we haven't done the second concerto before. So this is going to be a wonderful experience for us, and I think something the audience will enjoy enormously. Dvořák's New World Symphony, the 9th of his symphonies in order of composition, although sometimes called the 5th because it was the 5th to be published, is a work which reflects his experience coming to America to head a composition program at the newly established National Conservatory of Music in New York. It reflects both the impact of the bustling life of New York City in the last decade of the 19th century and his impressions of the wide open spaces of the Midwest. He visited a Czech colony in Spillville, Iowa on his summers. It's also suffused with nostalgia for his native country, and I think it is seen ultimately best as a work with an underlying, slightly tragic mode to it. The music of the middle two movements, we are told, was originally intended for an opera based on Longfellow's Hiawatha epic poems, but precisely what the connection is or would have been, we're not really sure. If you heard our performance last year of the Chadwick Second Symphony, Chadwick, of course, was an American from Boston and thought that Chadwick was drawing upon Dvořák's music. Its chronology is actually backward. The Chadwick antedates Dvořák's symphony by 10 years. Dvořák didn't draw on Chadwick. They both drew on some common sources of American, whether African American or Indian American, Native American music in terms of scale patterns and rhythmic patterns. Dvořák believed sincerely that an American national school of composition would arise only when composers took into account the richness of their native musical traditions. Something which has always been curious about the New World, and in fact about all of Dvořák's orchestral music, is that despite his experience as a routine and highly experienced orchestral player and conductor, he liked to write what I call pop-up solos, where somebody who doesn't do anything else, anywhere else in the piece, pops up and plays a 4-bar, absolutely crucial solo. There's a piccolo solo in the first movement of the New World Symphony, for example. The piccolo doesn't do anything else in the piece. The piccolo player plays flute, of course, but there it is. The tuba player sits on stage patiently through the first movement and through the last two movements and plays, I think, a total of, it's either 14 or 13 notes at the beginning and the end of the slow movement. And we're not even sure whether Dvořák wrote those notes in or whether the first conductor decided a tuba would sound better there than just the bass trombone alone. There are a couple of percussion notes which come out of nowhere, but they are exactly what the music needs at that point. They're totally apposite, and you simply have to have the extra player on hand for them. The New World is unquestionably among the most beloved of romantic symphonies. It's a work I conduct often, always with great pleasure, and with a great feeling of involvement. I think that at the end of the piece, there is a quality of emotional draining which is quite special, even among romantic symphonies, which have a habit of putting you through some kind of an emotional ringer. I think this is a very special one. I am enjoying enormously the process of rehearsing it. We are enjoying playing it. I know you will enjoy hearing it.